today does not attribute wrongdoing. It represents a simple choice. Do we as a House support transparency? And a decision. Do we think that truth in this place still matters? Now, Peter Mandelson's CV reads like an indictment, and we all know that, and I don't need to rehearse the litany of appalling and heinous decisions and acts that he has taken. And for me, there leaves no question as a result that the Prime Minister's judgment was absolutely found wanting in this situation. But given the seriousness of Mandelson's actions and the seriousness of this appointment, surely every member of this House wants to know why he was appointed, how he was appointed, and whether or not we and the British people have been given the full story of what happened. Now, I worked at the Foreign Office as a civil servant, and if I, listening in detail, reading every single detailed bit, feel that something doesn't sit quite right, if I have former colleagues ringing me and saying that's not how the process works, it just doesn't make sense, that's not right, if we then have the Prime Minister saying that he'd seen the vetting. Oh, no, I meant I'd seen something else. Sorry, I hadn't seen the security vetting. I'd seen the due diligence. Oh, there wasn't any pressure put on. Well, others most clearly think there was pressure put on. And if the honourable gentleman who just spoke is genuinely suggesting that there is no such thing as abuse from those who have more power against those who have lesser, that politicians do not sometimes behave appalling to civil services, and that pressure, oh, we're all busy, it's the same pressure. No, and that's why we have specific law. Let me finish the point and then I'll happily take this intervention. We have specific laws that represent that when someone senior to you puts you under undue pressure or treats you in a certain way, they have to take far more responsibility because they have the ability to exercise that responsibility and authority over you that you cannot challenge. And if the gentleman wants to come back and argue that he does not believe that in hierarchies, particularly number 10, political appointments versus civil servants, there is such an imbalance in power, I will happily have him make that case.
So I'm disappointed in the way that she just made that point. But no, what I saw in Sir Ollie Robbins' testimony was that he said that number 10 was repeatedly asking, has the vetting been completed? And that is inconsistent with the idea that number 10 regarded the vetting as immaterial to their decision. Quite the opposite. It demonstrates to me a number 10 that felt that actually this was an important process that had to be followed, and there was of course pressure to complete it quickly. That does not mean that there was pressure to change the outcome, and I'm sorry, but until somebody shows otherwise through evidence, there's no reason why we should believe that.
I'm sorry, but the idea that somebody just chasing an update is always done, and can I just check where we are with that? We really would like to get it done. And that there's no concept there could have been any bullying because anyone is just asking for something done a bit quicker. I'm sorry, but that is a foolhardy suggestion by the honourable gentleman. Now, the Prime Minister has come to the House many times, as honourable members would like to suggest, but he hasn't answered the questions. And the Prime Minister himself set the terms. Either he misled the House or he was reckless with the truth, and those are the terms that he set. Multiple people have lost their jobs over this Prime Minister's decision to appoint Mandelson. 2 civil servants and 2 political appointments. For a man who said he would never sack his staff for his own appointments, that's quite something. His judgment has also shown that he was happy to appoint people to Cabinet who had lied to the police, where he knew full well that they had done that. So there is a pattern. Now, Ollie Robbins lost his job for implementing the wishes of the Prime Minister by the book. Now, either he followed due process and was sacked for doing so, or there was no due process and he was sacked because there wasn't. The Prime Minister's position so far is that the former is true. It cannot be both, in which case Ollie Robbins should never have been sacked. He did his job under immense pressure and was stripped of the agency to say no. Mr. Speaker set out at the start of the debate. This motion does not attribute guilt onto anyone. The vote today is for an investigation by the Privileges Committee, and that is a committee chaired by my friend and neighbour, the Honourable Member for South Leicestershire. And I want to place on record my total faith in his probity and professionalism, because unfortunately we have seen in previous approaches and previous investigations that some may seek in future to undermine individuals. Now, I appreciate there are a range of views across the Labour benches, and some seem to genuinely believe the Prime Minister's version of events. Others share concerns on this side of the House, even if they're reticent to express those. I do want to point out that in the entirety of this debate, at no point has there been more than 9 Labour MPs at the backbenches who were elected before 2024. Now, I would say to those members, having been a new MP and having been through this process and watched it, having once voted, as I've said previously in this House, in a way that I deeply regret on the Owen Paterson vote, I had planned to vote against him. The reason for that was because I sat on those benches and I watched the debate and I was horrified by what I saw. And despite the enormous pressure from people around me, I went, right, okay, I've got to do what's right and I'm going to vote with those brave 13 who did the right thing. I then went downstairs to breastfeed my daughter, who was very young at the point, I think she was just turning 6 months. And when I came back up, there was only 1 minute left of the bell. And when I looked into the 2 voting lobbies, I couldn't see those 13 friends who'd gone the right way on the vote. So I was stood there on my own, absolutely terrified, not knowing what to do, seeing everyone else going through the other votes. And I never, ever, ever accept feeling that way ever again. And I say to the new intake, there is a reason why none of the other previous intakes are on these benches. There is a reason why anyone so far from the older intake who has spoken have said to you, if your gut is telling you there's a problem, there is a problem.
Absolutely.
They have given you their advice. Now, I know they tell us often how dismissive you all are of them, but there is... Oh, apologies. Forgive me, Madam Deputy Speaker. You would never be dismissive of anyone, so I correct myself entirely. But I would just say, there is a reason, and you should take that time to reflect and... Oh, my goodness. I can only apologise again. There is a reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, why older intake Labour MPs have chosen not to come and defend the Prime Minister today, because they've seen this show before. They know what happens, and they know that actually your gut will be telling you the right thing to do. And I also congratulate those who've been brave enough to speak out today and to share their views. The House will recall the government did attempt to whip Labour MPs against giving the Intelligence and Security Committee a role in assessing and releasing the Mandelson files, as per the humble address. Parliament asserted itself on that day, and we must do so again. A vote against this motion will show loud and clear that you followed the party line and that you forgave and ignored your conscience. No, that you... Oh. There is precedent here. In 2022, the House unanimously passed a motion to allow the inquiry into whether the Prime Minister had misled Parliament. We Conservatives supported that motion and not a single MP blocked it. So I do know how hard these are, because we've been there. And I supported the committee's findings that Boris Johnson had misled the House. So my advice to Labour MPs is to listen to your conscience and do what you know is right. Members will thank themselves as years pass by to be free from the weight of regret. But also, I would also point out that matters of standards should never be whipped. And I'd be interested to know if any Labour MP is willing to stand up today and say that the threat of having the whip removed has not been made, because so far none of them have said that. And I would also say to the front bench that there is... Indeed. Well, pressure seems to be an issue we need to debate more. I would also say to Labour MPs considering speaking in this debate, you may find that even before the vote, the government changes. The members may find that before the vote this evening, your party has changed its mind and you are no longer being whipped. So I would encourage Labour MPs to reflect on whether this is the record that a member may wish to have, because whips do change their minds if members represent themselves to them. So can you truly say that the whole story is out there?
Oh, sorry. Can I remind the Honourable Lady, it's not me. Much of this has been addressed to me. I'm not voting this afternoon. I won't be speaking. Alicia Kearns.
And I accept fully, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I do know better, so I apologise. The whole story is not out there, and a future release I will happily give them.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and she makes a wise and experienced speech today to this House, reflecting on her personal experience in previous votes. Would she agree with me that the question we must all ask today is, whichever side of the lobby we vote, we must justify that to our constituents?
Absolutely. And some members have suggested today that their constituents don't really care about process. They don't really care about whether the truth is told in this chamber, and they're not really interested in this privileged motion. That is most certainly not the case, and that is something members will experience in months to come. Madam Deputy Speaker, I fear that a future release of files will contradict the Prime Minister's version of events further. We discovered only this morning that Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor, was also appointed before being vetted. I asked the government about his vetting in February. I was told that national security vetting for the current National Security Advisor was conducted to the usual standard set for developed vetting. Does that sound familiar? Clearly something again went awry. Clearly due process was not followed with the National Security Advisor, and once again we in this House were told that due process was followed. Judgment is revealed not in the exception but in the pattern, and there is a very clear pattern in this situation. I will very happily give way.
I'm very grateful to her, and she comes to the crux of this debate today. Was due process followed or not? Would she agree with me that the simple fact that vetting must always come before any appointment, the simple fact, we've heard this morning evidence in the Select Committee where that was not the case, is very clear that due process was not followed.
The honourable gentleman is completely right, and we were told repeatedly and consistently that due process was not followed. Now, anyone who wants to tell me it was, I know it wasn't, because I've been through security clearance, which was the first level, where I had to wait for 7 months to hand in my notice to my existing job so I could join the civil service until I got security clearance. Then there was developed vetting, where again I had to wait about 6 months before I could take up that role. And then I went through strap clearance as well. So I've been through the work, so I've been through all of it. And it doesn't sit right with me, the accusation that due process was followed. And fundamentally, to the point about Ollie Robbins, it cannot be that due process was followed and therefore he deserved to be sacked. He must have breached due process if he needed to be sacked. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will be voting in favour of this motion. And tonight I will end my day with a clear conscience, knowing that I voted to give my communities the answers that they deserve. And I hope that every member can say the same. Because we are asking whether the man leading our country has the judgment the office necessitates and a commitment to the truth that is required. And at this moment, the country does not believe that that commitment to the truth is there. So let's have it and let's see if it was.